Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ahdurin region. I'm your host Ahdurin himself, and this is the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team Nuzlocke Edition. If you guys think I should add more words into the title, leave them in the description below, and I'll probably put it on at least for this part. This is part 0, where we go over the rules, regulations, stipulations, barriers, constraints, other confining words that this Nuzlocke run is going to go through. So in a normal Nuzlocke, it follows two different rules. Rule number 1, the first Pokemon in each route is the Pokemon that you are able to catch. You cannot use any other Pokemon unless you've caught it in that route, or if it was given, or some other clause like that. The second rule is that if a Pokemon faints, it is considered dead and no longer usable for the rest of your run. So, for example, if you have a starter Pokemon and you lose it in a gym battle because you type disadvantage or something like that, you are no longer able to use that Pokemon for the rest of your playthrough, which makes it a lot more difficult than a normal run. There is another rule in place, which is of nicknaming your Pokemon. The originator of the Nuzlocke comics did nickname their Pokemon. This is a rule that some people use, some people don't, depending on if they're good with nicknames. But the core Nuzlocke is based on these 2.5 rules. Now, there are other sorts of Nuzlockes that take these rules and add extra ones to make it even more difficult, such as type locks, where you're only able to use a select number of types. There are wedlocks where you have Pokemon paired up and you can only switch between those two Pokemon. I know Maryland in particular does really good jobs with his wedlocks. But the core Nuzlocke is focused primarily on these 2.5 rules. Now, the problem with Mystery Dungeon is that it's not exactly like a normal main series game. For one thing, you are the Pokemon, and for another thing, Pokemon don't faint in the same way that they do in the main series games. Another thing as well is that there aren't any routes, there are dungeons, and Pokemon are being recruited. It's a whole different ordeal. So I've developed, with a bunch of help from different sources, all of those sources are in the description below, I've developed a rule set that I'm going to be using for my run-through. If you want to use these rules, feel free. You don't even have to credit me, because I didn't create this myself, and people have done Mystery Dungeon Nuzlockes in the past. But these are the rule sets that I'm going to be playing through. This first page here is going to be the core, and then I'll have extra rules that are just added on for my personal enjoyment. So rule number 1, the first Pokemon that asks to join your team is the first encounter, kind of like how in the regular Nuzlocke, your first encounter is the first Pokemon that you run into in the wild. So for each dungeon that you go into, there are different wild Pokemon that'll come around and try to battle you, and the idea is that if you beat them and they ask to join your team, that is considered your first encounter. You get one first encounter for each dungeon, and this will count only the first time that you go into a dungeon and are legitimately able to recruit Pokemon. There are times where, frequently in the games, you'll go into a dungeon but not have the ability to recruit due to storyline and plot progress. I'm going to count the first time you go in and legitimately able to go through the entire dungeon while being able to recruit as the first opportunity on that route. That'll make more sense once we get into actual gameplay, but just know that the first Pokemon that asks to join the team is the first encounter. All guaranteed encounters are allowed, so there are some that are forced to join your team due to plot. All of these are allowed and won't count for any specific dungeon. This is sort of like a gift clause, I guess you could say. The first one that asks to join via job request is the one that I will allow as the joining via job request. So when you do specific missions and tasks that aren't related to the story, just regular missions, there is a potential that they may ask to join your team. The first one that allows to do this, I will accept. Any ones after that, I will say no, and that's going to be the same sort of idea as the first encounter. I am playing with no dupe clause, which means that if a Rattata asks to join my team after I've already accepted another Rattata, I am still going to be forced to say yes. There is no dupes clause in this run. You can play without a dupes clause, or with a dupes clause in place. That makes sure that you have a wide variety of Pokemon. I'm not going to do that because that makes the gameplay a little bit more interesting, in my opinion. But feel free to do this. I know that this was something I was torn between if I wanted to have a wide variety of Pokemon or just take what the game gives me, and I'm going to go with the second. Rule number 2, regarding the fainting, if the recruit faints, is considered fired, or I'm releasing it from the team. Since they weren't able to handle the business, as a result, they can't handle the team, and unfortunately, they have been fired. This is kind of similar to how you would release Pokemon when they faint and are considered dead. Now, if There are two exceptions to this. One of them is your partner. Your partner Pokemon is not able to be released in the main storyline of the game. So if your partner faints, in my case, I'm firing one random member, which I will literally just a random number generate and fire that person on the spot. The other exception is you. Obviously, you can't cut yourself from the team, otherwise the entire game is over. So if you faint, my rule is very strict about this because this is you controlling it and not AI. Therefore, I'm firing the top level member and a random member, which means if I faint, I have to cut 2 people from the team, which makes the entire journey even more difficult, and you'll see why in a second. Number 3, nickname all recruits. I'm going to be nicknaming them. They're probably going to be terrible nicknames. If you guys have any suggestions for nicknames, go ahead and leave it in the comment section when I recruit that person, and hopefully I'll look up the comments and then rename them if I find any names that are really interesting. Now, these are some of the extra Nuzlocke rules for the run. I talked about the core elements in the prior slide, I guess you could say, and this is just going to have extra things that I'm using for this run. I'll mention a couple others afterwards, different ideas that you might want to do if you do this yourself. So first things first is the personality test. In Blue Rescue Team and Red Rescue Team, they give you a personality test at the beginning, where you answer a bunch of questions and then they match up a Pokemon that matches with your specific nature. So they might call you a hardy Pokemon, and as a result, if you're male, you get one thing, and female, if you get another thing. There are male and female exclusive Pokemon, so as a result, I am taking this test legitimately, which means I'm going to answer all the questions truthfully. I'm going to say I am a male, and at the end of the day, we'll find out which Pokemon I actually am. I haven't done the test legitimately in a while, because I usually just go online, look up questionnaires, and try to get the Pokemon that I really want. So this will be interesting to see who I am. My partner in this run will be weak to me, type-wise, unless that's not possible. If that's the case, then I'll just choose a partner. This is sort of a minor thing, because more or less, you can beat the game with all of the partners relatively easily. But just in this situation, forcing the game to choose my partner for me based on my type. So for example, if I end up becoming a Charmander, I have to choose a grass type partner. Most of the Pokemon that you get to be are one of the starters, or your partner will be a starter. However, there are opportunities where your type isn't quite one of the main types. So for example, I believe one of the options you can be is a Machop, and none of the Pokemon are weak to fighting from what I can recall, because I believe it's just the starters. So at that point, then I would just choose a partner Pokemon that best fits with me. In this run, there are items called Reviver Seeds, which basically allow you to revive your Pokemon immediately after it faints, and these are extremely useful in especially the more difficult battles and dungeons later on. I am allowing Reviver Seeds. Once I enter a dungeon, I can have up to 1 for each member on the team entering a dungeon. So for example, if there are 2 people entering a dungeon, then I am allowed to bring with me 2 Reviver Seeds. If I find any on the ground, those are fair game in a dungeon, but I can only enter with as many Reviver Seeds as I have members, which is going to make the late game particularly interesting. Now, speaking of that team, how many people are allowed to be on this team? Well, the team entering a dungeon is going to be me, my partner, and 1 extra member, unless I'm prevented from doing so due to plot, or because I honestly don't have that many members, especially in the beginning of the game where you don't have extra recruits yet. So the team is going to be at minimum 3 people going in, so which means for the Reviver Seed example, I can bring 3 Reviver Seeds into any dungeon. This is going to make it a lot more difficult because while I can control my actions and my partner's actions pretty well, the third person, on the other hand, is a bit more on the outside and going to have worse moves or not as high of a skill level as me, especially actual level. So it's going to make the dungeons a lot more interesting and a lot more difficult in the future. There is a place called the Dojo. It's the Makuhita Dojo in this game. I know that it's Marowak Dojo in a future game, in the Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky. In this case, the dojo does not count as a death if I lose in the dojo, and this is how I'm going to be grinding levels, necessarily, outside of trying to recruit members through my, I guess, 1 free pass of going into later dungeons. For the most part, I'm going to be trying to do as few missions as possible. The bare minimum is what I'm aiming for right now, and the dojo is going to be how I really try to level myself up. For this playthrough, I'm going as far as possible with these Nuzlocke rules. That includes post game. So if I somehow am lucky enough to be able to win the regular game following the Nuzlocke rule, I will be going through post game. Post game for me has been an extreme challenge. I find that the level jump between the end of the game and the beginning of post game is tremendous, especially with the Pokemon that I choose, because I regularly choose Mudkip as my starter because Mudkip is the best starter in my opinion. And trying to go through a lot of the water-based dungeons with Mudkip is a lot more difficult than going through with, say, a grass-type starter. If or once I lose, probably the once I lose, this is going to change to a normal walkthrough or playthrough because I'd love to have this on my channel regardless of whether or not I complete it. So it'll be in the titles, I guess, or if I don't spoil it, then I'll figure something out with that once I get to that point. But no matter what's happening, I'm going through both the regular game and post-game of Blue Rescue Team. But I will be trying to keep up the Nuzlocke challenge as long as possible. So that about wraps it up. Thank you so much for watching. If there are any rules that I miss, I'll update the description of every part of the playthrough. The rules will be in the description. As well as that, I'll make a comment below in this video that'll answer any questions you might have. There'll be a pinned comment. Basically, I'll update it from time to time in case there are any rules that I messed up on. And here is to a great playthrough. Thank you so much for watching and for supporting the channel in any way, shape, or form that you do. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care. Alright, here comes the challenge.